The arena was, I think, a type of control.
Of course the Romans needed to dominate nature, because nature is the world. If you're going to dominate the world, you've got to dominate nature.
But that was easier said than done. In order to fill the amphitheaters with animals, the Romans had to catch the animals and then transport them, sometimes thousands of miles.
We can see that getting a huge number of animals to, for example, the Colosseum before a big show was a major logistical headache.
So how did the Romans do it in a world without tranquilizer darts or helicopters? The remains of this Roman villa in Sicily provide some fascinating clues. It dates back to the 4th century AD, and scholars believe it may have been owned by a Roman magistrate. The villa contains the world's largest collection of Roman mosaics, and many of them show how animals were caught for the blood spectacles.
What this owner is saying, basically, to the people looking at this film, I went to the ends of the earth to get prize animals for my games.
Africa was a rich hunting ground for the Romans. There they targeted the big five: lion, leopard, buffalo, elephant, and rhinoceros. Civilians got involved, and so did special units of Roman soldiers, dedicated solely to the task of providing animals for the arena spectaculars. One popular method of capturing the big cats began with digging a large pit. Lions could well have been captured in the following way.
You dig a pit, and you put a pole in the center, and on the pole you put a goat. Then you cover over the pit, and you build a low wall around the whole pit. That way, when the lion comes, he sees this goat kebab hanging there. But he can't see the ground around the pit without jumping over the wall. And once he jumps over the wall, you have his goat.
The Romans would leave the lion in the pit, sometimes for several days, until it grew ravenous.
Then the hunters would lower a baited cage into the pit, and they capture the lion that way.
To capture elephants, Roman trappers employed a different technique.
What happened was that, first of all, a very large and deep ditch was dug around an enclosure.
Well-fed tame female elephants were put inside the enclosure, and when wild bull elephants, attracted by their scent, followed the females in, the trappers would remove a drawbridge to the enclosure.
There wasn't anything for the male elephants to eat inside the enclosure. And after a few days, they would get very hungry and very distressed and very weakened. Hunters,
riding atop other bull elephants, would then enter the enclosure and do battle with the weakened males.
And they would, in effect, wear them out, and they would collapse to the ground, and they'd capture the elephant in that way.
The Romans used a variety of methods in order to capture these animals. One of the more popular methods was the use of nets. Sometimes the Roman hunters would enter the lairs of the animals in question, such as bear caves, and attempt to drive the animals out into a waiting net.
Animals, like people, can be panicked by fire. And so hunters would use torches. The panicked animal running out would be disoriented enough and afraid enough that it would run right into the nets or right into a pit or waiting trap.
Other times, Roman trappers would use alcohol to disorient the animals.
Presumably the Romans, when they decided to use alcohol as bait, would pour it into some sort of trough. These animals then, such as monkeys, would approach the alcohol in question, and after drinking their fill would either fall asleep or pass out, thereby, of course, making them easy prey for Roman trappers.
Having captured the animals, the Romans then had to transport them, another monumental task.
One of the more extraordinary aspects of the whole animal trade was the sheer distances that some of these beasts travel.
For example, many of the animals that ended up fighting for their lives in the Roman Colosseum were captured as far away as Ethiopia in the Horn of Africa. First, the animals were transported overland to a coastal port on the Red Sea.
They then had a 1,400-mile journey up to Suez. No Suez Canal, so what happened then? They would have been taken overland, either 100 miles westward to the River Nile, and then down the Nile to Alexandria, or else straight overland to Alexandria, which is about 200 miles from Suez. There is then another journey of 1,300 miles by sea from Alexandria to Rome. That is a 3,000-mile journey for some of these beasts.
Ethiopia to Rome, that's the equivalent of walking from New York to San Francisco.
Even though these animals were valuable commodities, we have to assume that many of them didn't make it on their journey.
The sea journeys were the most challenging, especially for the elephants, which typically need to drink at least 50 gallons of water a day and eat over 400 pounds of vegetation. And they would be at sea for up to 20 days if they were coming from Egypt.
Can you imagine what this would be like with a boat full of elephants? Even just one of these animals, spooked by weather or some other phenomenon, could have a disastrous effect on the voyage.
The elephants not only had to deal with the unfamiliarity of seaborne transport, but also with the whole loading and unloading process, which could also be an ordeal as well.
Pliny the Elder, the Roman author and naturalist, wrote about one particularly difficult disembarkation involving elephants at Pozzuoli in southern Italy.
The story goes that the elephants were afraid to cross the gangplank onto shore because they didn't like looking at the water as they walked over the gangplank.
The handlers came up with a creative solution to the problem. They turned the elephants around, somehow convincing them to walk backwards down the gangplank so the elephants looked up at the sky and not down at the water.
This illustrates the sort of problems that could be caused by nervous elephants during any stage of their voyage.
Making landfall in Italy was one thing. Making it to Rome was quite another.